Oh my god, it worked! Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to Firing Range, a podcast to talk about all things Destiny, weapons, abilities, loadouts, and the Sandbox at large. But first of all, who the heck are we? Hopefully you know some of us, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Why don't we go around the room and introduce ourselves real quick. Starting with Drew, a slender-looking handsome man in the red chair. Who are you?
My name is Drew. I love breaking down and analyzing different portions of the Destiny Sandbox, and I happen to make content about that. Basically breaking down different weapons, archetypes, abilities, armor pieces, just really trying to get a really deep understanding of the Sandbox in Destiny 2 and the combat systems to obviously better understand it and equip myself with knowledge, which helps in game decision making, as well as building loadouts to be more effective. But more than that, just finding different fun ways to play the game that makes different loot more desirable. You can understand different weapons, and maybe you might want to chase a few different things that you otherwise would have tossed to the side.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And before you start throwing shade in the live Twitch chat, thank you for joining us for this live podcast, by the way. Yeah, we did a live sound check. I'm just a goon, and I had the switch flipped in the off position. All my bad. Thank you very much for that introduction, Drew. Cool Guy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Cool Guy. Now, you might hear Austin. My name's Austin, CG. And what I do, I cover Destiny. I love Destiny. And one of the things on my channel is I try to, get the point across that gaming's supposed to be fun. Destiny's supposed to be fun. And you can use different things to do well in the game. Review weapons, go through the sandbox. And we all kind of do similar content, man. That's why I'm so excited to get into a room and talk about some of these things, even if I don't agree with them. And just have a good time, man. I mostly do YouTube. I'm going to be doing Twitch, of course, because I heard there's a game mode coming back next week. But I'm super stoked for it. And that's youtube.com/coolguytips. And on Twitch, it is I_am_coolguy. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me as well.
We're not getting any salt or sodium in the Twitch chat, my guy. The levels are good so far.
GG's.
GG, no re on that sound check. And who's this last guy? Who are you?
I'm probably the person who the least people know by sight. I don't think I ever do like camming or streaming or anything like that. So I'm Mercules. Most of you probably don't know me, but you may know some of my work. If you've ever seen a giant weapons spreadsheet that has all the stats color-coded and has times to kill and stuff like that, I'm the one who made that. If you're on Reddit a lot, which some of you who have a higher salt tolerance than others may be there, then I write massive breakdowns for Reddit. I've also written for PC Gamer and Planet Destiny and Destiny Tracker. And I was actually fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time at Bungie as a gameplay specialist as well. So I do pretty much what all four of us do here, which is study the sandbox and study the weapons and, try to make things easier for people to figure out what god rolls and what stuff they should be grinding for. And just in general, try to make the game a lot more fun for everybody. So.
I want to give you a particular shout out because everyone is super happy.
I do too. I was going to say that.
Invaluable to the community,
dude. This guy,
Thanks for
He is the real MVP.
The super
I
MVP.
appreciate that.
He's the man behind
Super
the screens.
MVP.
Like we're out here in front of the camera, engaging with people on a video level, but like his information so good, and he just puts so much work into these dynamite. Like I get excited about Excel spreadsheets. That's the kind of dude you're dealing with here. But this guy is like, he's just incredible. So thank you very much, all three of you, for being here. This is incredible. And me, by the way, I'm the host of the show. My name is Fallout. You can find me on youtube.com/falloutplays. Who am I? The community's uncle. Weird uncle in a way. I'm significantly older than a couple of these jabronis right here, but like them, I make YouTube content about Destiny. Why? Because this game is really fun, but it's very hard to understand sometimes. It's complicated. Would you guys agree with me that not everything is laid out perfectly?
Yeah, they're very vague at times.
Very vague.
Destiny is the most opaque, I think, shooter out there
It
in
is,
terms of how well they explain mechanics.
They like to bury things deep in the sandbox sometimes. So what we do sometimes is we all get together and we try to figure things out. We want to make sure that this game is widely understandable because we love to play it so much. People ask questions just because they're like, what does this perk do? What does that perk do? Great question. let's find out. That's kind of why we're all here. And I think if we're all good to move on, I think we got the introductions out of the way.
Yeah, let's start
Feeling good about
discussing
it.
stuff. Yep.
Perfect.
So we're going to talk about is the game mode that's coming out next week. It's a Rift, I believe. It's finally coming back after all this time.
Oh my
We're all
god.
very excited for it.
Totally.
Filing through my notes right now. What's happening now? So we wanted to talk about maybe 1, 2, or 3 things today on the show. One main topic, and then things sometimes will branch out from that point. But for right now, the topic of today's show, hand cannons. Things might break out from that point. So if they do, just roll with it. It's going to get weird. But for right now, we're here to talk about stats, loadouts, and in particular, hand cannons. So here's a question I'm going to throw out there to all of you. Anyone can pick this up because I'm sure there is a lot to talk about. What is the most important stat on a hand cannon?
Reload speed. Hands down.
Definitely. Oh yeah, that's what I
All
was
right, I'm
thinking.
going to cut this guy out from the call real quick.
So wait, we're not allowed to say to just spec it out the best that you can. We have to choose a stat.
You you can do whatever you want. This is
I'm gonna
our
say
show.
stability.
What's most valuable to you? What is most
Stability.
valuable to you?
There
You
you
get a
go.
hand cannon. What do you
As a
want on it?
console
What is most
controller
valuable?
player, stability.
Repeat what you just said for the people in the back.
Me?
Yeah, no.
As a console player, controller, stability. That's what I look for.
Now, cool guy, why is it important to distinguish between how you play the game?
So we're talking about inputs, mouse and keyboard, field of view, controller. Because obviously with mouse and keyboard, I'm quite new to mouse and keyboard. I'm not really good at it at all. I'm trying to get there, but I feel very comfortable with the controller when I go onto PC. But I mostly play console. But there, obviously, it's a little bit more. I'd say more violent recoil. It's really up in the air, up in your face. And if you get something like an Austringer or a Waking Vigil, and you get not max ability, but pretty close to it. On the Austringer, you can't get max. I made Fallout go farm a max ability one, and hopefully he talks about that one in a second. But it's a lot easier within their attended range. And what's so cool about this particular topic is like we all kind of work together, and there's of course more people. But I talked about a long time ago. I mean, I made a video. Range means nothing on a hand cannon. That's not entirely true, by the way. I want to get that out of the way. It has benefits, obviously, but on your input, especially with controller, there's a intended range. It's 25 to 28 meters. So like when you put on full bore and a range masterwork and all these things, you're gaining these. And there are perks like explosive rounds and rangefinder that can get you past that. But within range, getting that recoil to set quick, and I think Drew's going to be better explaining it than I am as far as what it's doing to your accuracy cone. But that's the most important thing to me. Like if I just get a base hand cannon and I get like small bore and that's it, and like a stability masterwork, I'm good as long as the perk set's good.
So the thing is, what I was going to ask. So, would you spec into max stability even if it means losing range, or do you want a medium between the two? Are you like mainly going for stability and then you take range otherwise, or would you say you want like if you have the option to spec totally into stability, you're going totally stability?
If I have the option, it would be the mix. But if I had to choose, it would be stability for me.
For controller.
Okay.
For
input.
controller on console.
Correct.
Yes.
For controller on console. Let's do this like a Tarantino film real quick because we dove into that one hot and heavy, which I did like.
Yeah.
But
Sorry.
for people, no, there's no apology needed, my friend. But for people tuning in who might have missed the really lengthy conversation we had about this topic maybe like 2 weeks ago, what happened? So I think Drew put out a video. Drew, do you want to talk very briefly about this video that you put out?
Yeah. So I had like some suspicions, or like I felt like I kind of understood just purely based on feeling how some of these things worked, but I didn't really understand the logistics and the actual like substance behind it. So I began researching things about the way, what does accuracy mean in Destiny? So on a lot of weapons or perks, they might have perks that say increased accuracy. Funny enough, the Fighting Lion's Catalyst gives a weapon that you, after firing it, more accuracy. And that's very vague. Like, what does that mean in a shooter? Usually you'd associate with that, like, how well you're shooting, right? But
Bungie
it's
likes
not
to
quite
try
like
and
that.
simplify things by taking, a lot, like, very descriptive phrases that you, if they were to say that, you'd be like, oh, I totally get that completely. And they try to shrink it down to like one or two words, like target acquisition. Didn't mean to jump in on you there, Drew, but
no, exactly. But that leads to that. So funny enough, upon researching, I learned a lot about the way that accuracy works and target acquisition, which is just the Destiny lingo for aim assist. And now, aim assist is a whole other thing within itself that is a few different functionalities or things that comprise what aim assist is. And funny enough, so upon researching this and trying to present it, so a lot of the video wasn't me trying to share my fundamental thoughts. It was actually just trying to find all the information that exists currently and present it. And that's where I found Mercules, who's on the call with us, really, really well researched information from Destiny 1. And this was on the basis of a mission called Last Rites?
It's called
Last Rites.
Yeah, it's called Last Rites. Yeah, so it's the only mission in the game in Destiny 1 where you go third person because it's a stealth mission. But oddly enough, when you're in third person, you can still shoot your gun. And when you ADS, your crosshairs change. And the crosshairs actually have, like, what we've learned through Mercules and what his research has allowed us to do is learn that the crosshairs actually have a crazy amount of information on how the weapon works, and especially for hand cannons, to say the least, at least, which is why we're focusing on that in this podcast or in this episode. So basically, I put out a video talking about the way the accuracy works, aim assist works, all based on Mercules' kind of findings in Destiny 1. I just took it and applied it to Destiny 2 to see if it was still applicable, which I personally deemed it was. It seemed like it was very straightforward and all the factors were pretty much still there, which you'd assume. I mean, it's a very similar game. I didn't think that would change, but just to be sure.
Well, I mean, I gave you those warnings too when you were talking to me. I was like, in fairness, I was like, I looked at all this in D1. I was like, I'm not going to tell you 100% that it works the same way in D2, but I was glad through your testing that you found that it did.
This is so meta. For those of you listening right now, live on Twitch, or maybe listening to the podcast later, you see the way that Drew phrased what he said? He was like, I took a look at it, and, I determined, for me, I determined that it was, we run into a lot of trouble sometimes. Trying to answer questions, because people have a ton of questions about the game. We love to do deep dives. But sometimes when we feel that we find information, we go with it a little bit, and then people take it as like, oh, it's carved in stone. You know what I mean? And you got to be careful, just from our point of view, when we're like, so I looked up Mercules' information, looked pretty good. I looked it up in D2, and as far as I could tell, it translated from game to game. That way, if information comes out later, it's like, hey, we found out that wasn't true. You lied to us. It's like, listen, man, we're trying our best out here.
Yeah, and the thing is like, what I think what Fall's trying to say as well is that, like, we're, at the end of the day, we are using the information that we can see in this pretty vague game, as we explained. Some of these things are quite vague, and we're trying to use all the information that we can see, that is tangible, that we can prove through in-game resources, right? And Mercury has obviously done, I think, the best at that. Of all of us, like, doing some crazy tests. And like I said, I think it's all relevant. Like, the vast majority is relevant in Destiny 2. I don't know if you wanted to talk about quickly about like a TLDR. I know that's a very big topic, but of how accuracy and range and stability kind of coincide with each other. Just a TLDR to kind of get back to the stats we were talking about.
Yeah, because the problem is if it's not a TLDR, it's going to be an entire episode's worth of discussion. But like, the moral of the story is that accuracy really has two things, and we know this because they talked about it in a TWAB, right? So this is information that Bungie themselves gave us. There's projectile accuracy, and then there's error accuracy. And error accuracy is what most people are familiar with, which is actually, the size of the crosshairs, right? Like, as you fire, the crosshairs expand outwards. And what that basically defines is how far away from center the bullet could deflect at maximum inaccuracy, right? So that's something that people became very familiar with when Bloom was a really bad issue in D1, because the error accuracy of guns was really, really low. And so hand cannons, although they look like they were accurate, could fire the bullet way off course, right? And then projectile accuracy is really the definition of how likely it is to deflect off course, right? So what hand cannons kind of had was they had really high initial accuracy, and that projectile accuracy got lower and lower. And so your bullet could just go 45 degrees away and you'd think you were aiming straight at the head, and you really weren't. right? And what we found and what they found in D1, everybody knew this, was that range narrowed the accuracy cone, right? It made your gun more accurate. And so everybody said max range everything.
So when you're talking about accuracy cone, just a visualization for people watching on Twitch, you got something like this, like a funnel situation, right? You're talking about D1. I mean, like if you could imagine it as like a cone, you know, totally a funnel. This is like the bird's eye view of the funnel.
Yeah, the way I'd explain it is like if you ever like kind of like click on a flashlight, and you know it has like kind of like
there you
the
go.
light coming out of the flashlight, and like it kind of grow, like it gets bigger over the course of like how far away you are from like a certain like surface. That kind of cone. Imagine that's on your gun.
Yeah.
So
and back
your
in
gun has a cone that with different. It could be narrower. It could be more expanded. Depends on the weapon and the archetype, of course, but and different stats as we mentioned. But that's what accuracy cone means.
And there was a time in D1 where a ton of range on your hand cannon, this was like the height of hand cannon popularity, like a ton of range turned that very wide accuracy cone close to something like a lightsaber, not like perfectly straight, but like it was very beneficial for your overall accuracy cone.
Yeah. And then what would happen is as you fired, it would bloom outwards, but because you had tightened it so much at the beginning, the bloom outwards wasn't as bad, right? So it still seemed pretty accurate. So everybody figured that out, and that made the mantra max range on hand cannons, right? And for the most part, people just kind of went with that forever. And the testing that I did in D1 was actually trying to disprove someone who I was in an argument with on Crucible Playbook that said that they felt that stability affected aim assist. And I said I didn't see how that could be possible, but there was no way we could tell. And someone else pointed out to me the Last Rites mission. So what we did is we found out that when you were in first person, you had your accuracy cone, which is defined by the crosshairs, but there was also a circle that was wrapped around the accuracy cone that was, you know, larger outside of the accuracy cone. And we tested a bunch of things, and what we found is that aim assist, the stat, actually increased the size of that circle, increased the diameter of it. It wasn't dramatic, right? I think maximum aim assist compared to minimum aim assist on hand cannon, the diameter of the circle was like 14.5 pixels compared to 17.5 pixels, right? But when you use that formula to find area of a circle, it actually made a significant difference. So we found that. And then what we found is that by increasing the amount of stability on the gun, that circle, the aim assist circle, which as you fire has the opposite effect of bloom. So bloom makes the accuracy cone bigger. The aim assist cone gets smaller and smaller and smaller and shrinks and eventually goes away. And so that's why your gun feels really, really tight and sticky on your first shot. But as you maintain fire, maybe it doesn't feel quite as sticky afterwards. And what we found was that stability actually slowed down that aim assist cone shrinking. And it also sped up the reset of the aim assist cone. So we found that out and wrote an article about it. And that information went out there and worked, and then kind of slowly vanished into D2 until it got dragged back up in this whole hand cannon stability versus range debate. And that brings us to where we are now.
Yeah, when Drew showed me that article of everything you had written up, which was, as he mentioned, from D1, we were like literally talking to each other. I was like, how have I not seen this before? How is Mercules not like at the top of the Destiny like food chain with all the insane deep dives that he does? It was super wild information. It branched off into a bunch of other awesome conversations, including each of us doing a video on the subject. Me going into menagerie with Cool Guy and farming for what I have dubbed the Cool Guy hand cannon roll on the Austringer for the controller, which is like insane stability. Don't care about range, except for rangefinder, because I like that perk. But for the controller, the thumbstick warriors out there, sticky AF. Do we have any thoughts on, because we've answered the question, what stat for the thumbstick warriors on hand cannons? Does anyone have any thoughts on what stats for the clickers and the flickers?
Handling and range.
Yeah, I know that not all of us are like probably the most like M&K savvy players. But if I like had to like relay even something like Cammy would say, who does play M&K full time, and how I understand the sandbox at least, is you want either handling or range. Range is less impactful, I want to say, simply because the damage changes or the damage drop off changes to hand cannons. Range doesn't impact that like it once did earlier on in the game before those changes. The one with Shadowkeep where they changed the recoil animation and fixed that, but they also took away some range and made that a lot more strict for hand cannons. So range isn't quite as impactful for damage fall off at least. And why that's a big deal for mouse and keyboard players is because mouse and keyboard, it's assumed from what we can tell, has higher accuracy. So because your range isn't affecting your accuracy perhaps as much, that's why we default to handling. So it'd be a mix between the two.
Well put. I want to give a quick shout out to the person that you just mentioned, Cammy. So everyone that you're seeing here on the podcast, we all grew up in the world of gaming with controllers. Many of us right now are diving deep into the world of M&K. I'm not going to speak for everyone here. I find it very fun. Some people less than others, admittedly.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Oh, word? Save that for
guy.
another time. That's a whole other episode right there.
I don't think Drewsky is either. So at least it's like 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top. You know?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But special shout out to Cammy, who I don't want to dive too deeply into the future of us talking together, but we may be hearing more from him in the future. Anyway, why don't we move on to something about Season 10. What hand cannons, if any, are you guys bringing into Season 10 PvP? Do we think anything is going to change drastically? Because we know there's a Sandbox change coming up, right?
Yep.
Pretty sure we all have that on the top of our to-do list right now.
Yep. And I think that I think we've seen the majority of what is changing. I want to go ahead and say that we've been given quite a few patch notes. I don't think much is changing for hand cannons. We've been told that there's no changes to the other archetypes. Like, that's a big discussion. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. That a lot of people have said, like, no love for the 140s, no love for the 110s.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as, I guess, to kick it off, like what hand cannons I'm taking into the next season, no, I don't think much is going to change. Not Forgotten to me is tried and true. I think that hand cannon is incredibly good simply because of the way it handles or the way it inherently benefits from increased accuracy.
The frame.
Yeah. So the really cool thing and why Not Forgotten is still my pick, even though it's some very competitive hand cannons out there. Not Forgotten is still my pick simply because it is a 150 RPM hand cannon, which means it deals the same damage as like something like Thorn, not minus the burn or Spare Rations. However, it does not share the same intrinsic weapon frame. It has a precision frame, which formerly belongs, of course, to the 180 RPM class of hand cannons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this matters because precision frame hand cannons or things with that intrinsic perk have a higher accuracy level. Or the line on it says fire quickly with high accuracy. And of course, and we get a nice little vague comment of high accuracy. And through some tests that I've personally done, you can see that through the same crosshair information that we used in previous tests and dating back to what, kind of Mercules put on the table from D1. Yes, it has higher accuracy, meaning more chance for the bolt to go completely straight, less chance for that error angle. Mercules talked about better in-air accuracy naturally. And again, of course, consistent recoil because it doesn't recoil the same as other 150s. But that, specifically speaking, that accuracy to me matters most. So that's my pick for a hand cannon. I'd say honorable mention for me is going to be Waking Vigil, or Spare Rations.
Unfortunately, got to be Spare Rations, right? Like people
There's got to be.
Got to be Spare, boys.
Yeah, and Thorn will probably be up there too if people want to sacrifice the exotic because all the things that made it strong in the most annoying meta of all time, the Thorn Last Word meta from D1. That will probably be the most unpopular thing I'll ever say. But the burn to prevent recovery, I mean, the fast rate of fire, the fact that burn helps to negate a little bit of damage fall off when you can do extra damage. I mean, those things are still going to make it popular in trial, in the new game mode when it comes back.
Well, not to mention that now revives, correct me if I'm wrong, but revives in trials, you can't be taking damage. It resets your little revive counter. That's another utility that Thorn will benefit from, definitely.
That's a good point. What you're saying is if you're trying to revive your buddy, if you're taking any type of damage in trials, you can't revive your buddy. So Thorn is extra special because you're taking that burn damage. It's preventing you from picking up your dead buddy.
Yep.
Well done.
Agreed.
So, yeah, kind of meta now. didn't look like there were any changes that we've seen so far that would make them not meta when Trials comes back. So
Cool guy, my off-meta man. You got a different answer for me on hand cannon season 10?
Well, when it comes to Trials, man, I mean, console player again, it's got to be Not Forgotten. It's got to be Not Forgotten or Luna. I use Thorn, and it'll probably be Ace. That'd be my other one, just because of Memento Mori and the Thorn burn tick. But it's kind of forced for me, like into Thorn and Spare, and for a lot of players, because they share the same engagement range, distance. They kill faster than the 140s and 110s, right? So I'd like to get into that if you guys are okay. I'll kind of start it off talking about 140s and 110s.
Oh, you want to go into different archetypes of hand cannons?
Yeah, because when you think about it, I mean, the 0.8 versus a little bit, it takes a little bit longer with the 140. Not only are you getting off the 3 shots faster, but say you both miss in a gunfight, you're getting off the 4 shot faster, Spare, and like they're literally all within the same range. So I'm finding 150s, and that's what I'm using. So Spare, if I'm not using Not Forgotten, it's going to be Waking Vigil.
Talk to me a little bit about Waking Vigil.
I think it's the most, aside from NF, it's one of the most consistent 150s in the game, because it has the perks. It has Slide Shot. It has Slide Shot with Opening Shot. You can do opening shot with Snap. Like, just a very snappy hand cannon that feels good, has a good recoil direction.
I feel like we could get...
I want to...
Oh, go on, Drew. I was going to say, I feel like we could get Drew to talk about... Are you going to talk about Slide Shot? That's the word of the day.
I swear by Slide Shot, so I am a controller player, right?
Yeah,
like I said, the majority of us are. But I play controller on PC, and I don't think Not Forgotten's the be-all and end-all because of guns like Waking Vigil and Spare Rations. And it's, to me, simply because of one perk, and that is Slide Shot. Slide Shot, to me, is such an absurdly strong perk in this game because of what it allows you to do in terms of stats for a movement that most higher skilled players are going to be utilizing anyways. So Slide Shot, for those that don't know, increases your stability. It reloads the weapon partially, but that's not the important part to me. It both boosts range and stability. So we talked about the impacts of range and stability. Stability allows you to have your aim assist cone stay a little bit more persistent, not shrink as much. Range tightens your accuracy cone. Those are debatably the 2 most impactful stats on a hand cannon that in the game, when looking at stat boosts, they try and make you give up one for the other. Slide Shot just gives you both. And on controller, for me at least, without even applying any sort of recoil compensation, you can 3-tap someone with Slide Shot with your thumb off of the control stick. Like, no recoil compensation needed.
Yeah.
Which is like...
It's not a lie. Like, when you use Slide Shot, you feel the effects of it working right away. Like, it feels clean and crisp. And, like, we know that it works even... I mean, I've heard some people be like, oh, it doesn't work if your hand cannon or your gun is already at full ammo. From what we've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, it still does. So you don't even need to partially reload your gun. You don't need to bleed the magazine out in order to compensate for Slide Shot later. You just get the boost, even if your magazine is full. And like Drew said, when you mentioned people are doing this anyway, you're talking about movement, right? You're talking about moving and sliding. Most players that you see every now and then will throw out a slide, like in a game of PvP, because movement, staying unhittable and not just running in a straight line like a goon, you're going to be doing that kind of movement anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, a lot of people prefer to slide as a movement option simply because it allows you to be mobile while being able, to fire, to be ready to engage in a fight at the same time. And Slide Shot just plays into that so well. Again, high-level players, you see them sliding in and out of cover because, again, they can engage while staying mobile. And Slide Shot, especially, I want to say on controller especially, again, tighten the accuracy cone. You're going to hit shots. Your gun's going to be a little bit more accurate when it does start blooming out. But not only that, again, you're going to keep the best odds of, aim assist or bullet magnetism kicking in and having those shots register as headshots, which is just, there's no downside. To me, there is no downside. You can do it with a full mag. You can just slide around, and it's a weird perk because it doesn't actually tell you it's active. So you kind of have to go based on I slid. I'm going to feel it. But, I mean, cool guy, I think you have something to say. So.
No, but kind of follow. If you disagree, that's fine. I think we talked about it earlier, but any perk in this game that states specifically accuracy like pay attention to. So that's your mods with targeting adjuster. That's opening shot, giving a bonus to your opening shot accuracy. Firmly planted, slide shot, right? Anything like that. There's a lot going on under the hood that makes the weapon feel really, really good. And like old fashioned's like the only hand cannon, right? With firmly planted.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really insane what it does to it. It's really good with pulse rifles, and a lot of people don't like firmly planted. Just always remember you can knee slide with it. You can get, let's say you're in a mid gunfight, you can crouch in between. Really good with pulses, obviously. All my top pulses that I use have firmly planted that can roll it. But continue on, Drew.
No, yeah, I mean, just to bounce off that, like I think that firmly planted is such an absurdly underrated perk. And I was gonna say this, that the only way, in my opinion, that things will change or potentially change in terms of meta shifting, in terms of like hand cannons in the sandbox right now, is if firmly planted comes on new hand cannons. If Dire Promise as a 150 comes back with firmly planted, or whatever, a new hand cannon has it with a desirable archetype, which is right now 150, I'd say is what most people want, that will be very good. And firmly planted is not something that like I have to sit and crouch while I engage. No, it's something that when you fire your first shot, which is the most accurate. Your second shot, because of bloom and the effects that we stated, gets a little less accurate, but usually still decent. And then your third, in my opinion, is when you start feeling those impacts of like, okay,
your accuracy.
You're accurate. Exactly. Firmly planted allows you to just dip into a crouch and reset it, as far as I can tell, back to your first shot. And again, if a lot of skilled players love to just pop in a crouch.
That's so important. Yeah, I think when people think about firmly planted, because they read the description of the perk, and depending on your gun, you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to crouch in a corner.
Crouching
with my dad rifle, crouching in the back of the map on Midtown, being a goob. No, we're talking about stuff that you do in the middle of the gunfight at like mid to high level anyway. I mean, like you see a lot of people, like Drew mentioned, you're in that moment. You're doing the dance. You guys know what I'm talking about? You're dueling someone with a hand cannon. You're strafing back and forth. You're engaged in the dance. To throw them off their shot, you might just throw in a crouch randomly to try and make them miss, shoot over your head, something like that. You got to mix up the dance a little bit. And what Drew's saying is that if you're going to do that anyway, you might as well take advantage of the fact that your gun is blooming out, your shots are getting less accurate. Crouch on like the second or third shot, boom, you're back to like borderline almost pinpoint accuracy. And it's like a super underrated perk, and Drew wishes it was on more hand cannons. Confirm or deny,
I really
Drew?
Do. I really do. I think it would actually, in my opinion, change up the meta. I really do. The consistency that perk provides, and it changes your recoil pattern to be like perfectly vertical. Like it does so much simply for just like pressing one button.
It's like no matter what the direction stat is, it just goes to 100.
Yep.
It just becomes like so reliable out of clear blue sky. Drew, here's one right off the tip of the tongue. You got you got the perfect Drew hand cannon in your hands right now. But one of these perks has got to go, all right? You got firmly planted. You got slide shot. You got rangefinder and kill clip. Let's say two of those have to go. What's out? Between those four, what's out, Drew?
I don't like rangefinder. So
Doesn't
I'm going to
like
say no to that.
You don't like rangefinder?
Yeah, I don't like
There's a lot
rangefinder.
that don't. That zoom factor it gives, man.
The thing is, that's the thing.
Zoom factor's so okay.
I like it. I know players that don't.
Rangefinder to me, I think that it's very clearly, I can never dispute the benefits, but I think it's a feel thing. It's like you got to use it, you got to try it.
Feel thing.
If you like it, if you're clicking with it, then power to you. To me, I've tried. I literally can't aim in close range with a rangefinder. God help me, I don't know why.
Because the minor extra zoom factor on the, because I know when you snipe, you got that curated Twilight Oath, which I'm not going to get too deep into, but it's got that really low magnification scope, which I know you're a fan of, right?
Yep.
So do you think it's something like that might be throwing off your hand cannon shot, or is it something completely
I think it's
different?
that, and it's another factor, which is another thing I would let Mercules talk about before I do, if we're going to get into this. And it's the way that zoom interacts or alters your accuracy cone and aim assist cone.
Yeah.
The way that I like in layman's terms like explained it is that there are like sweet spots on a weapon. based on, and this alters with a lot of the time, the zoom and the archetype of the weapon. So if you ever felt like you're using a hand cannon at close range and like you have to be like so pinpoint. It's like you're so close to someone but you have to be like right on their head. And then other times, like there's some like videos that I've seen that like to try and show aim assist in Destiny that go like 30 meters out from a target and they're like, look at it. It's just like I'm shooting the stomach and it's a headshot. That's what I describe as sweet spots. There's an actual technical reason for why this is, but rangefinder changes those sweet spots as a result of the zoom. I don't know if you want to like get into this, but Merc can like explain it a lot better than I can.
Do it. Drop a knowledge bomb.
We can talk about it really, really simply, but as we know, like range is more of like a multiplicative effect than it is like a linear effect on range or on like the actual physical range of the gun, right? So what we found is that in D1, if you looked at the crosshairs and they were like this big, and then you put a high zoom scope on it, they narrowed super, super small. And what actually happened is that it was basically dividing the accuracy cone down and down and down. And so you have snipers, which have high zoom scopes, and their accuracy cone is, the size of a pin. And then you've got shotguns, which are very, very low zoom, and their accuracy cone is huge and massive, but of course they're only effective. And Drewsky's exactly right. They're sweet spots where your aim assist cone blooms out and it hits a point where the aim assist cone is really, really effective and really, really wide. But up close, guns' aim assist cones are very, very narrow, right? And the higher your zoom is, the longer that cone stays narrow for. So basically, when you increase the zoom of a weapon, you're pushing out that effective sweet spot. And so what can happen is if you're used to the sweet spot being 25 meters on your gun, and then you slap rangefinder on it, maybe now it's at 28 or 29 meters. And all of a sudden, everything you know and love about your gun feeling at a certain distance feels different because now the accuracy is better, right? But the aim assist is more narrow. So at 25 meters where you would get a hit before, if you throw rangefinder on that, you might not get that hit at 25 meters. The trade-off is that at 28 meters, where maybe you had aim assist drop off before, now you can get a hit.
That's a very good point.
Right. Yeah, so it's not a net negative. Like some people
but like eventually it just ends, right?
Negative,
like right? Think hard light, right? Yeah. Like a long distance hard light shot just simply will not hit. Have you guys used it with M and K? I mean, I can't do it with controller, obviously, but I mean, there is an end.
Yeah, in Halo,
rangefinder pushes that out.
Yeah, it was red reticle range, right? So when you hit the end of red reticle range, you lost aim assist. You could still hit stuff outside of it, but the game wasn't going to help you anymore. So you were kind of just goes away. Lucky. Yeah, and so in Destiny it has the same thing. We just don't get it displayed to us because, it's a different type of game. It's
sure. So, I have an Austringer with rangefinder. I'm used to it. You know what I mean? Because I haven't used many other Austringers. It's because 140s are kind of the neglected hand cannon stepchild right now. Many more people are in favor of 150s, right? But like Drew, what you're saying, you got that sweet spot. Put rangefinder on it. Your cone goes out a little further. The stickiness factor changes. The sweet spot changes. And so now you're engaging in these gunfights where you normally are like, oh yeah, dude, I got the rhythm down. I got the motion down of the dance. And then you're like, oh, where's the sticky factor?
It's a little different. Exactly. Right. It's a little different. So I really think it's a feel thing too. Without the jargon that we love to talk about, I really think rangefinder is something that like try it. If you drive with it, if you like it, stick to it. If you don't, then I mean there you go. It's not. I don't think as much as that perk gives you a lot of benefit, it's not a be all and end all. So for me, I was just gonna say for me on my roll, I ditched the rangefinder.
Drew is personally rangefinder out, which is fine. Yep. Which is I was gonna go on and say that can we all agree that like for a lot of things in this game, not everything, but like a lot of things, many of it boils down to like what do you feel is right. Yes. And it's a lot of it's like a play style thing. I've seen fights break out in my Twitch chat, which are like some guys like, you know what? I really like 140 RPM hand cannons, and people are like, he's a witch, burn him right now, excommunicate from the group, and it's like, dude, look, the recoil pattern, it might just click with his brain better. Maybe the 150s are too fast. Is the time to kill? Is it going to be a little bit better if he was perfect? If he was perfect with a 150. Yeah, but if you're only landing every 1 out of 4 shots with a 150 because it doesn't feel right to you, then that player is going to be deadlier with what feels right to them. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of perks in this game that we absolutely know the benefits of. and
Yep.
we could discuss them all night. But there's a lot of things and situations like what I'm going to now call a Drew rangefinder situation, where it's like, even though there are the benefits right there, you know what? It just doesn't work for him, you know?
Yeah,
And that's okay.
Remember, like our passion for dissecting the sandbox and like combat systems is driven by, of course, a want to find the best, or a want to min max, if you will. But it's also to understand why maybe things feel good to you. Like when you know something feels good, but you can't quite put your finger on it, and at least you have the information to say, oh, well, this is feeling good to me because of this stat, and I have this on this weapon. And I think that's just a little bit of a cool thing that allows you to identify what kind of weapons you want going forward that work for you.
It's extremely important to stat, like, as it goes all the way down to the mod, right? A lot of people say, well, I have this nice spare rations, it has this perk, it has an Icarus grip, and should I use that or target adjuster? I'm like, well, do you jump? If you're not jumping, put on a target adjuster. Like, just stat it out to what you do. Like, it doesn't have to be what this person, that person says, really. You can follow some guidelines. But, like, I had one the other day. He's like, yeah, I don't really find that much benefit. He plays Warlock. He doesn't play top tier or anything, and he doesn't jump. I'm like, just put on a target adjuster, dude.
Yep.
Very simple. Just stat it out the way you want it to be. Stability, range, handle it.
It's just that easy.
We said in our other podcast, it's like, look, at the highest level of gameplay, those milliseconds matter. And things like TTK and perfect shot and extra meter of range, like that stuff matters at the highest level. There's such a small number of people who are playing this game who actually play at that level, when the majority of people are playing Control or playing Classic Mix or playing, Iron Banner or the Rotators or something like that, right? And at that point in time, you playing with the best gun in the game, if it doesn't feel right to you, isn't going to help you win. It's whatever gun you're comfortable with that's going to help you win. And people ask for like weapon recommendations all the time. Like, out of the whole sandbox, what weapon do you recommend? And it's like, well, what range do you like to engage in? What playstyle do you like to do? Do you like to be airborne? Do you like to pop in and out of cover? Like, you got to narrow it down more than to just what is the objective best, because there are objective best things out there. When we talk about it, there are things that objectively are numerically, statistically better in the exact same category than other things. But if you're using it and it doesn't feel good to you, it doesn't matter that numerically it's better. It matters that you're not doing as well as you could be with it. So
it's like if someone was coming over for your house for dinner, and your instructions were make them the best food in the world. It's like, well, what do they like to eat, dude? Where are they from? What do they like?
Are they a fan of pizza, or do they like steak? I mean,
right. Do they like sushi, or are they terrible human beings? There's like, you have to find out more information before you can give a recommendation. Right?
Yep.
Good. All right.
So, what were the perks you offered me again? I was gonna say, like, going back to the
we're going back to the one's got to go. All right,
the hand cannon thing. I'm curious. Yeah. So I dinged off rangefinder. What were the others? Kill clip.
It was kill, which I think you're gonna ding off kill clip between firmly planted and slide shot, because you want that that sick neutral game hand cannon,
especially for trials.
On
he's thinking.
On the top, like, I want to say yes, I want the neutral game, but I also struggle with thinking, is this now redundant? Because firmly planted works when you're sliding. So now does this become a win more? Like you know what I mean? Like an overkill? Like, this isn't enough? Or like, or should I just take the firmly, I think it would be firmly planted kill clip. I feel like there's a level of redundancy within firmly planted slide shot. So I might have to say kill clip firmly planted.
I appreciate that answer. We're going to move on to community questions. Now, I tweeted this out earlier today. If you guys are anything like me, we are often kind of bombarded with like questions about loadouts, questions about weapons, and advice for the meta, all kinds of stuff like that. I don't know about you. I love answering these types of questions. We don't have unlimited time, but I picked out a couple questions from the Twitter thread. Thank you all very much for your questions. If we don't get to you today, well, maybe next time. But here's one from Calixto Erico. For SMGs on controller, do you prioritize range or stability?
Cool guy, you want to start with this one? I feel like you have the most experience.
Stability. It's got it, because at a certain point.
Stability.
Because remember what stability is doing, right? It's not. Like the engagement distance for console with an SMG is so different than PC and mouse and keyboard. It's night and day. It's night and day. Like,
you're not bound by reticle stickiness, right? You're not bound to reticle stick to your shot.
Correct. Like I've been farming a Callus Mini tool to pair with Mida for Trials, because I think Mida is going to be pretty good on some maps when Trials comes around. So I started using this thing, and the last SMG I really used confidently was Recluse. Now Recluse is a stat monster; it's really, really good. But something a little bit with lower stats in certain categories, I could feel it. So I started every single time doing my chalice for the stability masterwork, because at some point you're just not hitting anything with a controller. It's so difficult. Even if you get the recoil direction straight, you get everything where you need it to go. It has a very, very specific range. So definitely stability for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm on console controller too. I always say to people, like, all the range in the world doesn't help if I can't keep the gun on target, right?
Exactly.
So it doesn't matter what damage fall off is doing if the gun's jumping all over the place. And it is a whole different ballgame on controller using SMGs than it is on PC. PC obviously has a whole different stability function thing going on with how it allows weapons to jump, but
Sure.
on console, there's a reason you didn't ever see anything other than Recluse for like the longest time. So
Good
I gotta
point.
go as well.
Good answer. Drew, anything
I'm
else?
gonna say range.
All right. Love it. Go for it.
I'm not team stability. I don't like stability. I understand what it's doing. I understand it lets me control the weapon a little bit more. And I feel like the train of thought, I feel like Cool Guy, like when we talk, I feel like I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the mentality is if you're in your engagement range anyways, like stay within your engagement range and spec the highest for your engagement range.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you have to
So,
like field of
yeah.
view is so like on PC using controller at max field of view, I feel a lot better than on console.
Okay.
But that's also a huge thing to go with it too.
So for me, I say range because my mentality is on a close range weapon. I don't even care if it's just a little bit. I want to push out that maximum engagement distance as far as I can. And recoil compensation, to me, I just put that on me as like my skill as a player. I understand there's a randomness. I'm not going to be perfect. But I do feel like when on controller at least, when your reticle is like, grabbing the target, when you are within that range, it becomes significantly less, not difficult, but it feels more consistent to control the recoil, more intuitive, if that is the better word. So I like range. I want to push out my engagement distance as far as I can, and then if possible, supplement it with as much stability I can after specing for as much range as possible.
I do want to point something out here that also has an effect. Zoom also actually helps with stability as well. And zoom, like we mentioned earlier, is a multiplicative effect instead of linear. So if you have the option of an SMG that has higher zoom scopes, you should definitely try to roll with that. I know it narrows the field of vision a lot, which might be something that Drew doesn't like because he didn't like rangefinder on hand cannon for the same way. And it pushes out the sweet spot a little bit. But what they actually told us is that zoom, they decrease the amount of actual jump of the gun as you go up to higher zoom levels of scopes, because if they didn't, what would happen is when you were zoomed in super high, your scope would jump so much that all high zoom scopes would be unusable on anything that had actual recoil.
Like the Antiope is a really good example of that with its and like on the flip side, like what was it, Cold Front, the one from like almost impossible to use on console, man.
It's very difficult to use on console.
It's extremely.
Oh yeah, like
it's like wild.
Controller PC, like it's that gun's got no stability though. Like that's actually like literally zero. Like very low. Yeah, that was hard for me.
They're different games, man. They really are.
It is pretty funny. The difference is an answer you give between controller and M&K, and then also from console and PC where you can change the FOV and all that stuff. It's just wild how different the answer can be based on those criteria. Good answer, boys. Okay, we're moving on to the next question from over the bill. Do you guys think auto rifles, especially 600 RPMs, will make a comeback and be not just viable but a competitive option in PvP?
Not only
there's some inherent drawbacks to auto rifles that just kind of limit their effectiveness in high level gameplay, right? The fact that you don't have super great inner accuracy comparatively. Now you can, and they're better than some other guns, right? I would say that auto rifles are probably one of the better primaries behind sidearms and hand cannons for inner accuracy, right? They're certainly better than scout rifles. But there's a very strong motivation to kind of keep your feet on the ground with them. And then the second biggest drawback is that you have to maintain constant line of sight. You can't dodge in and out of cover like you can with burst weapons or single shot weapons, which is a drawback. And then their range, you know, they're actually going to have a faster time to kill in D2 than they had in D1 when they were at their peak, which is amazing. The 600 RPMs are.
Yep.
Yeah, 0.7 seconds. They were at 0.8 seconds. Granted, it was an easy to hit 0.8 seconds in vanilla D1. But what's going to end up happening is that in vanilla D1, they weren't necessarily strong because of time to kill. It was because their range was competitive with pulse rifles. And they got a range nerf, and ever since they got hit with their range nerf, it kind of clamped them down into a certain usable distance. And that usable distance has a lot of competition in it for strong stuff. So do I think they're going to be stronger? Absolutely. Do I think they're going to be competitive at a high level in the right hands? Probably. For most general players, I think there's still going to be some really limiting factors that keep them out of that upper echelon.
I would agree. I would think that they're going to become definitely more user-friendly across the board, like that for the wide spectrum of PvP players in the game. One thing I don't like about auto rifles that they have trouble with is when you're using cover to like peek shoot on people, you know what I mean? Yeah. Which is like what hand cannons are like the masters of. You pop out, you get one shot, then you go back into cover, pop back out, give them another. You know, you're waiting for your moment while utilizing cover to stay hidden. With the auto rifle, you kind of have to really pretty much completely expose yourself and remain out there. I am looking forward to using them a ton. I don't think they're going to become like if you were to open up Twitch and watch the top level comp carries and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to be an entire squad of 3 auto rifle users, but I do expect them to go up in popularity, probably a bunch.
Yep, I think that I agree with you guys. I think that there's a newfound potential for auto rifles. I've been enjoying using Suros Regime personally, and I do think that it's got the potential to be a breakout weapon for this next season. There's some really good 600 RPM autos. I don't think the other autos are going to be quite as good. Again, just the fact that their TTK just isn't as good, and for all the limiting factors you said, I really think it's 600 RPMs everyone can safely say is going to be the most potentially competitive. But again, there's tons of limiting factors. You know, a big thing about hand cannons is just how many shots you have to hit. You don't have to hit more, like, again, for an optimal time to kill, more than 3 shots with a hand cannon. And they do, of course, really high damage per shot. What that means is a skilled player is not going to reveal themselves for any longer than the millisecond they need to peek out, put in their headshot, and back into cover. And keep doing that. And then if you're an auto rifle user on the other end and they're only peeking out for that like split second, where you're gonna get like 3 shots on them with an auto rifle, like, and that damage does not compare most of the time to something like hand cannons. And then of course the inner accuracy, because you have to hit less shots. That means in the air, there's your hits matter. I feel like more because you don't have as many shots to be missing, if that makes sense. With like a bullet hose kind of auto. I do think, though, you talked about range. I do think the place where auto rifles get to really see some potential is range. The way that damage drop off affects auto rifles versus hand cannons is far less punishing to that of an auto rifle.
For like 2-3 meters before the drop.
Don't get me wrong. I agree with Merc. Like the space is incredibly competitive. Like incredibly competitive. However, when you are just right outside of that, that hand cannon range where they start saying, hey, we're getting a few numbers off of your highest damage output, that's where autos get to really punish them. And with this time to kill, I think there's a lot of potential within that.
You can also get hard light is getting buffed as part of that archetype, right? Which doesn't have damage fall off, which is super useful. Plus bonus damage outboxing. I mean, my weak point is like also for trials, which is super team based, their burst damage isn't high, so they end up, they're not really great at finishing off someone who's absolute is a call out that a lot of people use when they're really still at like 70 health, and it's not really absolute.
Just
with a hand cannon, but with a hand cannon, that's 1 hit, right? So you can still get them with a headshot. With an auto rifle, that's like 3 or 4 hits, and you're just, that's not an instant thing. You're gonna miss those guys as they run behind cover. So
like they look really good on paper. Like, and me personally, what I think's getting ready to happen to them is it's not going to feel like a complete disaster to use one. Like, you can do well. Like, I don't think that they're going to rise extreme to the top, because a good player with a Thorn or a spare rations, they're not going to let you do what you're doing to other people in higher level, like in trials in the final ends of the card. You're not going to be able to get, constant streams on them. They're going to be peak shot and you. They're going to be up in the air. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, I think.
Good call, boys. Well done. Cool guy, we're going to start with you on this question because I feel like we got to you last right there and it wasn't fair. So here's from Nerf That Nerd. What Sandbox change are you most looking forward to in Season 10?
Honestly, it's the one I'm most curious about, is what they're going to do to shotguns. I know that sits well with you. I'm gonna kind of talk about what I want to talk about.
Go
into it. Yeah.
Hello, Fallout.
But anytime in a patch note, they specifically talk about adjusting a range stat on an archetype. That happened with pulse rifles, that happened with hand cannons, and you see different things, right? So, and they're also saying ADS no longer adjusts effective range for this weapon archetype.
That's huge.
That's big, dude. Like, that's basically hipfire, right? Would you guys agree with that? It's basically like every distance would be like a hipfire. Like, that's how I read that.
Yeah, that's how I read it as well.
I'm sort of reading it that way.
I mean, that means it would be severe, right? Because we would say about 8 meters would be the consistent. I mean, 8 or 9.
8 or 9, depending on the how good your RNG is when pulling the trigger. If you have a really perfect God Roll Mindbender, you should be able to get a one-hit kill on your friend at 8 meters, like 9 out of 10 times, depending on the pellet spread. But yeah, about 8 to 9 meters.
We need to find out like what the goal was with this. Is it because if it means consistency, that's good too, right? Say it gets down to 6-7 meters, but it's a consistent pellet spread within the cone that's going to get the one-hit kill. I feel good about that. But sidearms come into play, especially if they get nerfed to 5, 6, 7 meters. That's the most interesting thing to me. Other than that, all the exotic changes.
So just so I understand, you're most looking forward to potentially the shotgun changes because you think if they get reeled in, you think more weapons will have a time to shine in close range, or you're hoping for more consistency from shotguns with this change?
Both, because it could mean something really bad for them. It could mean something good how you look at it. But that's so big that changes like the makeup of how a lot of people play Destiny. I mean, there's going to be top tier players with their movement. They're going to do fine with shotguns, but if it's brought in significantly, that opens up more weapons, if that makes sense.
Fair.
I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Drew, do you have an answer to what change you're looking forward to most?
What change I'm looking forward to? I think there's 2 at the top of my head, if I had to just rapid fire. 600 RPM autos are exciting. I absolutely love Service Regime. I'm going to be using that a ton. I love that weapon. I love the nostalgia of Vanilla D1, so I'll be definitely injecting myself with some of that nostalgia. So there's that. I'm excited to see how those do fare, even though there's a lot still against them. I'm excited to see how it goes. And then next, all the walls are gone, except for Spectral's inherent ability for True Sight.
So you're looking forward to be the only boy with super elite hacker vision.
Of course, a surprise. All the walls are mine.
That could be a
walls are mine, bro.
It could be a surprise. It could be a surprise. What if that does go too? That's crazy. I think that's an insane change. OEM, no more walls. Sanguine, no more walls. Not even Capri's. The free walls is what I would call it. Not kill dependent. The free walls are gone, which I really thought was going to be a very massive, insane problem in trials. Like, imagine round start and just both teams are just, let's put down a rift.
I don't want to imagine it, and I'm upset that you forced me to.
So. Remember season 3 comp? It got there. It was close. So,
Merc, what about you?
I thought that was gonna be very bad.
I'm looking forward to the nerfs to all the one-hit abilities. Honestly, on the other podcast I do, we had a thing where we were talking about the things that we thought were most detrimental to the sandbox in its current state. Because I think we can agree that for the most part, the sandbox is actually pretty nice.
That's pretty good.
It's not bad right now. Yeah.
There were some things that I really thought were a little bit out of hand. Super damage resistance was one of them, but the one that I really, really felt was a bit much was the amount of one-hit kill abilities that we have now, with each class having one and them all having just crazy, crazy levels of tracking and aim assist associated with them. And everybody's seen the video of, I think, Giggs running away from a throwing knife, and he like jumps and the knife literally curves up and then
curves towards him. That's great.
And it's like, oh man. And Handheld Supernova, everyone's been that guy that like feels like they juke the shit out of a warlock that's using it, and yet you die feeling like 10 meters away from where he was actually aiming, or the person who the Titan turns around 90 degrees and shoulder charges you around a corner or something, right? And so I'm very, very glad that they are tweaking all of those things to make them require at least a little bit more skill. Because I don't have a problem with stuff being really, really strong if it takes a really, really strong player to use it to its full stability. I don't like feeling like the game is playing the game for the player. And there were some abilities that kind of felt like that to me, and I'm glad to see them go under the knife, so to speak.
I would agree with you 100%. That's coming as a Warlock main.
Yeah.
A little bit more intention now behind those one-shot abilities rather than just like...
Right. Being able to be like... Time to press the win button. Of course,
plus it opens the door for me and Heart of Inmost Light and Titan fusion grenades. Now,
oh no!
Oh
no!
Oh Lord!
It's like, oh yeah, I'm back.
You have a nostalgia too, I see. Huh?
We're gonna do one more question, and I like this one a lot, especially for this crowd right here. From Bushman on Twitter, what is your go-to "let's have fun" rather than play the meta weapon loadout?
Arundel.
I said 100%. Rather than play the meta, you
We're starting like that, huh?
This is live, Mercules.
I love Black Scorpion, man. I love Black Scorpion. I got one with Moving Target and Rampage that I just absolutely freaking love. It's a great feeling gun. I tried a whole bunch of different guns during the Randy's Throwing Knife quest. Because I wanted to love the high impact scouts, because in D1 Chaos Dogma was like my favorite weapon ever, and I used it nonstop in PvP. It was such a great gun, and I've wanted to love them so much in D2, but they just really have never felt like they had their time in the sun. So I was kind of just like going down the list of other scout rifles to use, and I had a Black Scorpion in the vault and took it out and absolutely loved it so much that it's one of my staples in PvP now. You know, granted on an appropriate map, like Midtown or something, right? I'm not going to, Twilight Gap, but it's I think that's my favorite off-meta weapon right now.
Good answer. I'm going to jump in real quick and say that my favorite loadout when I'm goofing around right now, it's actually been putting in decent work in PvP, is Monarch and the Breachlight together. The double primary boys in 2020. I have a huge love for the Monarch. What a goofy weapon. There's nothing more fun. I just giggle like an idiot when I hit someone with the bow and then they limp off behind a corner with the tick damage. But like aping them, I love the Breachlight. I've talked with Cool Guy a bunch how we think the Breachlight is like a super underappreciated primary weapon. I love that combo with the Season 9 Obelisk armor mods, where you can get charged with light, and then with the right armor loadout, you can actually get... Maybe shouldn't be sharing this information. You can get a one-shot bow kill with the Monarch if you hit them in the head if you're charged with light, which is so fun.
And also with Empowering Rift will burn them down and they'll die one shot with the Monarch.
It's so much fun.
Thank you.
The shenanigans. You're welcome, buddy.
That'll
I can
be
make
my
it so much worse. Drew, tell people about your favorite fun loadout for PvP.
My favorite fun loadouts, this one's pretty wild, I know, but spare rations and mine, I'm joking. That was really creative loadout there. No, I love the partner weapons. The partner exotics to me are just like the coolest, or one of the coolest things that they brought into Destiny 2, and they're just so much fun using two weapons that just have a unique synergy together. I love Mida and Mida Mini Tool.
It's fun, yeah.
I can't explain why. The Mida reminds me of the DMR from Halo, and for some reason Mini Tool just feels like a really good SMG. And then Sturm and Drang for just the swapping, the hot swap gameplay between the two is just, it's a blast.
I know you don't see
I really love those.
Yeah, I was really hoping you would say that, because like I know you don't see it a lot at high level PvP, but watching someone use the Sturm and Drang like really well, it's just like I tune into you on Twitch when you're goofing around.
It's inspiring.
Yeah, dude, I'm like, oh, Drew's putting on Sturm and Drang. Let's go, because it's just silly.
I haven't done it in a while. I'm gonna have to do it again. It's harder in this shotgun, very strong shotgun world we currently live in. Not that snipers aren't strong. I just got to go on the record and say snipers are absurdly strong right now. But with shotguns, and what Cool Guy said earlier, that means there might be a little bit more room for Sturm and Drang to play. So it might be something I pick up again.
Tuesday might be Sturm and Drang day. Cool Guy, what do you got for fun loadouts, buddy?
It's going to be Oath Keepers, with a Monarch and a 110 hand cannon. Like every comp season, I go to Legend with Monarch Duke, and it's so fun because Oathkeepers, you can just run around holding, hold it to be drawn. You're guaranteed the poison damage. So if you hit him in the body with the bow, you hit him in the head with the 110. If you hit him in the head, you can clean up the body shot with how the poison damage works out. But with the Rampage 110, it starts doing 100 damage on a one stack, so you can start two tapping people after that. My favorite way. It's one of my favorite ways to play. I love it.
Good man. Good answer. I'm glad we finished that question off with some number talk there. It's been a while since we brought the numbers up.
Yeah, it's been 20 minutes since we broke out a spreadsheet. So.
Hit me with my fix, Merc. Hit me with that spreadsheets fix. Well, that's pretty much it for the questions right now. If we didn't get to yours, I'm sure there might be a time in the future when we could.
Just maybe.
Yeah, just maybe.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I mean, for all of you out there listening right now, if you enjoyed the episode of this podcast of Firing Range, let us know on Twitter. We want to give a shout out to DCP for letting us do this special episode. This evolved kind of crazily from like, hey, why don't you all come on DCP and we'll talk about some stuff. And then we got the distinct impression from Twitter that we could just do this and y'all would tune in. And it seems like
if you'll have us
in the beginning, so right. We have a lot to learn.
I had a blast.
I had a great time too. Everyone, please let us know on Twitter if you enjoyed listening to this episode, if you want more, and we'll gauge the feedback on that. But for right now, we're going to go around the room one last time and do our plugs, because that's what it's all about, boys. Cool Guy, where can the people find you?
YouTube.com/CoolGuyTips, and definitely for trials, streaming Twitch.tv/I_am_cool guy. That's where I'll be.
Good man. Drew, where are you at?
My YouTube channel, youtube.com/Drewsky's channel. My Twitch, I'll also be streaming trials and just general PvP. That's twitch.tv/Drewskys. And then my Twitter, if you want to add me any questions or just fun interaction.
Great follow on Twitter. Drew's awesome.
Thank you. Twitter.com/Drewsky's channel.
Merc, tell the people where they can find you.
I am Mercules 904, and it is Mercules, by the way. I know some people have said it's Mercules. I don't know where you get that pronunciation from, but it's Mercules 904 on everything. Xbox Live, always looking to play with more people. I'm on Twitter, Mercules 904, if you want some rambling, salt-filled diatribes about various things that either I love or hate in the Destiny community or game at the time. I'm on Reddit, of course, Destiny the game. Always, all of my breakdowns go up there first. So if you ever want to, get on the cutting edge of the stuff that I'm posting, and then I also have another podcast that I run that does something very similar to this, but with a lot more cursing and salt. So that's Destiny Massive Breakdowns. Anytime there's a new group of weapons that come out, we try to break them down and recommend rolls and stuff like that. So if you guys want to give that a listen as well, be most appreciative.
And even though he's not here tonight, I would like to give a special shout out to Cammy Cakes, because he was a part of this coming together. And there is a strong potential that y'all will get your Cammy fix moving forward. So please go ahead and Google Cammy Cakes. I believe he's at twitch.tv/Cammy Cakes. And what is it, youtube.com/Cammy Cakes? Just Google it. How many Cammy Cakes out there could there be? There's one. Just find him. He's
famous enough. You'll be able to.
He's good enough. Camille Cakes.
He's got an anime girl as his avatar everywhere. So just
perfect.
Look for that.
So 50% of the people listening are looking up already. And for me, I'm the host, Fallout. Thank you all so much. You can find me at youtube.com/FalloutPlays, twitch.tv/FalloutPlays, and there should be a lot more content for me coming because I'm now officially 1 week in as a full-time content creator. So hope to be seeing a lot more of you boys and all of you out there in the community. So thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it very much. Hope you all have a great time playing Season 10. I know all of us will.
Trial.
Oh, I can't wait.
Can't wait for Trials. We'll see you out there. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Later, everyone.